Welcome to Life Stories, where we explore the real-life experiences that shape us into who we are. Today, we delve into a powerful journey of self-discovery, resilience, and the courage to set boundaries. It's a story about a daughter who, for years, felt invisible in her own family, overshadowed by a sister who seemed to have it all. But what happens when the truth is uncovered and the invisible daughter steps into the light? Stay tuned as we share a tale of love, betrayal, and the lessons learned from walking away. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to start today's journey. The fifth time my father's name flashed on my phone, I almost let it ring out. I stared at the screen, watching it vibrate softly against the sleek surface of my desk. The sound of it felt so distant, almost like a memory from a past life. I was sitting in my apartment high above the streets of Chicago, 5 stories up, the city skyline gleaming in the afternoon sun. It was so different from the days when I was a child, sitting at a scratched oak table in our small family home trying to finish my homework while the world around me seemed to swirl in chaos. Outside my window, the wind swept through the city streets, carrying with it the hum of daily life. But here, in my corner of the world, there was silence, the kind I had come to crave. It was a silence that let me breathe, that gave me space to be who I was, without the weight of other people's expectations pressing down on me. I hovered my finger over the ignore button on my phone, just as I had done several times before. The thought of answering felt like a betrayal to the version of myself I had carefully built. The version of me that didn't rely on anyone, especially not the people who had never truly seen me. The leather chair beneath me creaked as I shifted my weight, and for a fleeting moment, I considered walking away from the phone entirely. But before I could, my inbox pinged. The subject line read, "Your sister needs you, last chance." I clicked open the email without hesitation, my stomach tightening as I read the words. Everything in that email was blurry except for one sentence, the final one. Chloe's wedding is the most important event of her life. Be there or forget about any future support. I could almost hear my father's voice in the back of my mind, commanding as always. His words had a familiar ring to them, the pressure to conform, to make myself small in the shadow of my sister's perfection. I had spent years learning how to shrink into the background, to make myself less noticeable, less of a problem. A voicemail notification popped up next, and I pressed play, setting the phone on speaker. The voice that filled my apartment was unmistakable. It was my father's, as commanding as ever. "I don't know what game you're playing, but this has gone on long enough. Your sister's wedding is in 2 weeks, and the festivities start this weekend. If you can't put aside whatever grievance you have for Chloe's special time, then you can forget about any future support from this family." His words were sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. "Your mother is beside herself with worrying. Call me back immediately." A bitter laugh escaped my throat. I couldn't help it. The irony of it all was almost too much to bear. The same family that had never supported me, that had never truly seen my achievements, now wanted my presence as though I could simply erase the years of being invisible. I crossed to the closet, pulling out the framed diploma I had hidden behind winter coats, a small act of rebellion that I had never shown them. The golden embossing on the diploma caught the light. Hannah Reynolds, Bachelor of Science in Data Science, summa cum laude. 3 years of hard work, of proving myself in a world that had always told me I wasn't enough. And yet here it was, gathering dust, hidden away because old habits die hard. My father's disapproval, my mother's indifference, all of it had shaped who I had become. A successful woman, yes, but still the invisible daughter, the one who never quite measured up to Chloe. I tapped open my banking app, checking my balance. $138,000, 139 sitting there in savings, more than enough to never need their support again. They just didn't know it yet. The memories flooded in. I was back in third grade, clutching my perfect report card with 5s, holding it out to my mom, only for her to glance at it briefly before returning to her magazine. "That's nice, honey," she had said, without lifting her eyes from the page. That same night, the living room had erupted in cheers for Chloe, who had earned a participation ribbon in the school play. Did you see how she projected her voice? She was the best one up there, my dad had said, his face glowing with pride. And there I was, sitting invisible on the stairs. There had been the science fair in my sophomore year, the blue ribbon for my water quality project. My parents hadn't even been there, of course. They were too busy at Chloe's soccer game. She had scored a goal, and for weeks, that's all they talked about. I swallowed back the bitterness, the feeling of being unseen. Senior year, I had received my acceptance letter from the University of Chicago, my hands trembling as I read the scholarship offer. My mother's concern was immediate. "That's so far away. Chloe might feel inferior if you go there while she's just attending community college." And my father. He hadn't even looked up from his newspaper. "We've discussed this. You're staying local." End of story. The quiet negotiation that followed, I could live in a dorm at State, just 20 minutes away. I argued for it. They agreed, thinking I had surrendered. 2 weeks later, I boarded a bus to Chicago with everything I owned into suitcases, leaving behind a carefully crafted paper trail of community college registration and a fake dorm assignment. It was my first taste of independence. Now, standing before my bathroom mirror, the reflection that stared back at me was someone they wouldn't recognize, confident, successful, and burdened by the need for their approval, no longer the invisible daughter. I returned to my desk, tracing my fingers over my name on the diploma. Hannah Reynolds, product analyst, 6-figure salary, invisible no more. This was it. It was time for them to see me. The decision felt inevitable as I stared at the screen, booking a first-class ticket home. My fingers moved with surprising confidence across the keyboard, securing a flight that would bring me back to the family I had tried to escape, the family that had shaped me into the person I had become but never fully understood. I whispered to my reflection as if for reassurance. "It's time they finally see me." The words felt hollow at first, but as the ticket confirmation flashed up on my screen, a strange sense of peace washed over me. I was no longer the same scared girl who used to shrink into the shadows. I packed my bags carefully, tucking the diploma, that proud symbol of my independence, between layers of clothes. My designer luggage sat neatly by the door, the weight of it reminding me that this wasn't just any trip. I wasn't coming home as the daughter who silently endured. This time, I was walking into that house as someone they could no longer ignore. I imagined their faces when they saw the woman I had become, and a smile tugged at the corners of my lips. The rental car crunched over the familiar gravel of the driveway, the sound bringing me back to those years when I'd walk out this very same door, my heart heavy with the burden of feeling unseen. The house had been transformed into something almost unrecognizable, every surface meticulously arranged for the impending wedding. Ivory fabric swags draped across the porch railings, white roses filling the air with their sweet fragrance. It felt like walking into a bridal magazine, everything polished, pristine, and completely out of touch with the truth I had come to understand. My mother opened the door before I could knock, her hair a precise shade of honey blonde, not a strand out of place. Her hug felt stiff, almost like a performance. Finally, she said, "Decided to support your sister." There was no warmth in her voice, no acknowledgement of the years I'd spent building my own life. Just a transactional statement, as if my presence had only ever been useful when it served someone else's agenda. Inside, the house smelled of vanilla candles and fresh paint, a clear sign that wedding preparations had taken over every inch of their world. My father emerged from his study, reading glasses perched on his nose. Without so much as a greeting, he handed me a clipboard. "Good, you're here. The programs need to be folded, and these guest welcome bags assembled. Chloe needs these done by 4. I didn't even have time to digest what was happening before he thrust the clipboard into my hands, as though the very act of showing up for my sister's wedding had granted me a new role, one I had never asked for. He barely looked at me as he issued orders. "You just walk in the door. Now you have something useful to do." I fought the urge to remind him that I wasn't here to be a servant, that I didn't owe him anything. I hadn't been home in years, and now, when I finally arrived, all I was good for was wedding preparations. "Nice to see you two," I muttered under my breath before Chloe appeared at the top of the stairs, her phone pressed to her ear. She looked at me with a raised finger, a clear sign to wait. When she finally descended, she gave me an air kiss near my cheek, then said, "Thank God you're here. The caterer is threatening to quit, and Mom is useless with the seating chart." Her voice was dripping with sarcasm, as always. "You're welcome, I guess," I said, my tone flat. The fiancé, Elliot, walked in precisely at 6:30, carrying an expensive bottle of wine. He was tall, with a clean-cut handsomeness that belonged in commercials for luxury watches. Chloe immediately lit up when she saw him. "This is Elliot," she said proudly. "He's an investor, a crypto-millionaire." My mother beamed at him, already enthralled. "You'll meet him at dinner," she said. "He's absolutely wonderful, so brilliant." I couldn't help but notice the way they hung on his every word. My father, too, seemed captivated by him, eager to discuss investments and opportunities. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about Elliot, though. During dinner, when there was a rare pause in conversation, I asked, "So, which exchanges do you primarily trade on?" Elliot's smile froze for a moment. "Oh, a mix. Mostly private platforms, exclusive access through my network," he replied, smooth as ever. "Fascinating," I said, not hiding my skepticism. "And your company's based where?" "We're decentralized," he said smoothly. "The beauty of blockchain, right? I have partners in Singapore, Zurich, Dubai." I raised an eyebrow, but my father shot me a warning look. "Not everyone wants to discuss business at dinner," he muttered. It was as if discussing anything that didn't fit into their narrow view of reality was a crime. As the evening wore on, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. This wasn't just about a wedding. Something deeper, more insidious, was happening, and I wasn't sure if I was the only one who could see it. The night ended with an uneasy tension hanging in the air, but it was only the beginning. The next day, I found myself searching through my father's study for the wedding programs. It felt strange to be in this room again, the room where my father had always retreated to, behind closed doors, where I was never invited in. The walls, lined with books I never touched and papers I never read, now seemed like a fortress of secrets, holding more than just financial documents. As I riffled through the clutter on his desk, my eyes landed on a set of refinancing papers dated just 3 weeks ago. I paused, a cold sensation creeping up my spine. The property I had grown up in, the house that had been nearly paid off, was now carrying a sizable new mortgage. I picked up the papers, scanning the numbers that seemed too large to ignore. In that moment, the truth hit me. They had put everything they had into this wedding into something that wasn't real. I knew immediately that the money had gone towards something more dangerous, something that had been lurking in the shadows all along, Elliot's so-called investment opportunity. The distant murmur of voices drifted from the dining room, freezing me in place. My father's voice was unmistakable. "Are you sure about this second mortgage?" he was asking, his tone strained. My mother's voice answered, filled with concern. "That's everything for my inheritance, to Helen, if this goes wrong." Elliot's voice interrupted her, calm and smooth. "We're talking about guaranteed returns, Helen. I've got investors lined up. This is how you build real wealth." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest as I set the papers down. It wasn't just my parents' money on the line. It was their future. I could hear the betrayal in my mother's voice as she expressed her doubt, but it was already too late. Elliot had her hooked. I stepped out into the backyard, trying to steady my nerves. The garden, once a place where I had spent countless hours with my aunt, now seemed like the perfect metaphor for what was happening inside the house. Withering flowers, things left untended, and truth slipping away unnoticed. That's when I saw her, Aunt Helen. Her eyes met mine, sharp with concern. "You see it too, don't you?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Elliot's a fraud." I nodded, my throat tight. I had been feeling it for days, a sense of unease that gnawed at me. But it wasn't just about the financial risk anymore. It was about the fact that no one in my family, least of all my parents, wanted to see the truth. It was too uncomfortable, too hard. And Chloe, blinded by her own happiness, would never listen to anyone who threatened her perfect day. And Helen and I stood in silence for a moment, the weight of what we both knew heavy between us. My aunt's voice cracked slightly as she spoke again. I had a feeling the moment he showed up. "Your father wouldn't listen to me. He's too proud." I nodded again, remembering the countless times I had tried to warn my parents, tried to make them see that their choices were flawed, but they didn't care. They never had. I turned to leave the garden, but before I could step away, a voice called out to me. It was Mr. Thomas, my old science teacher from high school. I hadn't seen him in years, but his face was still familiar, full of the same quiet intelligence I remembered. "Been following your career," he said with a smile. "Heard you went to the University of Chicago. That's one of the best data science programs in the country. Quite the achievement." For the first time since arriving, I felt something akin to pride. "Thanks, Mr. Thomas," I said, my voice steady. He nodded, his eyes still studying me, and like your parents, some of us actually pay attention. His words hit harder than I expected. I had spent so much time feeling invisible, like I was constantly being overlooked in favor of someone else. But in that moment, I realized something important. My achievements were mine. No one could take that away from me, not even my family. As I walked back inside, I felt the quiet shift that had been growing inside me for years. I wasn't just a product of my family anymore. I was something more. And for the first time, I was ready to stand up and make them see it. The evening was already falling, and the tension in the house was palpable. I knew the confrontation was coming. It was only a matter of time. As the evening wore on, the weight of everything I had been holding in finally broke through. My parents were no longer the invincible figures they once seemed, and my sister's perfect world was beginning to crumble. I gathered the evidence I had painstakingly collected: bank records, police reports, the signed statement from Karen, and the photos, and I placed them on the coffee table in front of them. Chloe, with her mascara smeared and face pale, looked at me in shock, while Elliot, his charming smile now replaced with cold calculation, stood by the fireplace. "This is not who he claims to be," I said, my voice steady but firm. "He's been running scams across the country. These are just the latest victims." My father's face flushed crimson, and he immediately dismissed the evidence with a flick of his hand. "This is absurd," he muttered, his arrogance unshaken. But the tension in the room told me otherwise. Chloe's face twisted with anger, as if the very foundation of her perfect life was being ripped away. "You've always been jealous of me," she spat, her voice cracking. "You just want to ruin my happiness." But I stood my ground, knowing the truth was on my side. "I'm not doing this to hurt you, Chloe. I'm doing this to protect you." The word stung, but I couldn't back down. Eventually, after an exhausting emotional battle, the silence that filled the room was deafening. My family was in denial, but I wasn't leaving until they understood the truth. As I packed my things, my mind raced with the reality of what I had just done. I had walked into that house an invisible daughter, but I was walking out someone entirely different, someone who knew their worth and refused to be silenced. I left, not as a daughter they could control, but as a woman in full control of her own life. Thank you for following my journey. Be sure to subscribe to Life Stories for more real-life experiences and lessons learned from those who've lived through them